I'm not only going to talk about porn. I do really like talking about porn. And I do. I never thought that I would say that. In fact, I remember sitting in youth camps and people would talk about porn and I was just like, gross, hate this, don't want to hear about it. Please don't tell me about your porn stuff, weird, no. And here I am. I talk about porn all the time. So that's been a huge transition. A little bit of background about me. I first did some study in sociology and social policy, and then I, at the same time, got a job teaching sex education in high schools, and I did that for about 7 years, which was a really interesting time. Kids, would ask really amazing, phenomenally funny questions. So they would ask things like, are 2 condoms better than 1? Do you know the answer? Yes? No? No. Why? What? Break each other? Yes. Everybody put their hands up like this. We're doing it. We're all doing it. Okay. And then whack them together and rub. What happens? Gets hot. That's called friction. And so that's what happens, and they're more likely to break. And they would say things like, oh, if I have sex and then I jump up and down and have a shower, that means I won't get pregnant. You're like, so sorry, go take a test. So that was a really great time. And basically that study and the sex education experiences made me want to go and work with people one-on-one. So then I trained as a counsellor, and I was working in trauma and abuse, and I was working with kids and with young people, 90% of whom had experienced sexual abuse or physical abuse in the home or were being neglected in some way. And I wanted to do my master's, and I remember I was pregnant with my second child, which is a really bad time to think about doing your master's. But I remember, and I was pregnant, and I was talking to my mum, and I was painting my son's room, and I said, oh, I want to do my master's, and I don't know what I'm going to do it in. Maybe I'll do it in abuse and trauma, and that's obviously what I work in. And mum was like, I think you should study sex. I was like, whoa, that got weird real fast. and then I said, why? And she goes, wow, you talk about it all the time. And I didn't know that. And so then I did. And that was really the spark, which led me to doing my master's in sex therapy. And so I finished that through Sydney University. You can't train in New Zealand. So I finished that at Sydney University, I don't know. I can't even remember when. Was it last month? Was it a year ago? Don't know. Also had 3 kids very close together. No idea when anything happened, basically. But that's what I did, and so I work in private practice. I work with couples or women by themselves who are struggling with their sex life or who have experienced betrayal in the relationship, where one partner has been unfaithful in whatever way, or they're struggling after having babies and what that's done to their body, and there are various reasons that people want to talk about their sexuality. So that's what I do, and then another big chunk of my work is around pornography, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. These are my... Does it work? No, it doesn't. What's happening? Is it on? Whoa! There they are. I have 3 sons. Does anyone else have multiple sons? There are a lot of penises in my life. And a lot of them are touching their penises all the time. My sister, she doesn't have any kids, and she's just moved to New Zealand, and she came over, and they had just come out of the bath, and she was like, wow, they all just really touch themselves a lot. It's like, yeah, welcome to my life. So they're 2, 4, and 6, and which they're very cute, just some of the time, mostly annoying. The oldest one is 6, that's Jack, obviously, and he is experiencing his first crush early. would we say? Yes. I did also have my first crush very early. I remember a boy called Harry that I really liked, and I thought he liked a girl called Emily. And I remember, honestly, being 7 years old, and I was like, I need to take her down. It's fair to say I did. So Jack is experiencing his first crush, and we're having lots of lovely conversations about that. Beau is turning 5 in a month, and he's going to school in a month. He has decided that it is not for him, and he does not want to go to school because he thinks it will be too hard and too boring. And when Beau gets bored, he hurts people. So that's going to be super fun for his teacher. And then Danny, he's obviously 2, and we are toilet training, which, if you've gone through that experience, basically just means that there's poo and wee everywhere. Just all the time. In the lounge, on the driveway, in the bedroom. It's a free-for-all. The toilet in his mind is pretty much just everywhere. So that's what's happening. What else do I want to tell you about me? Nothing. That's good. So it's a new decade, and I don't know if you knew that, 2020. New year, new decade. Now, Y2K. Who remembers? The intensity that was Y2K. So I want you to tell the person next to you, where were you the year 2000? And did you hoard a lot of food? Go. I was about to tap into the teacher like, but we didn't have to do it. Oh, you love it. Okay. Lydia, where were you? Y2K?
Oh, just saying, I had 3 young kids.
3 young kids. You were crying. You were sleeping and you were weeping. Sam, where were you?
Yes, we ended up having a big one at our place.
A big one?
As in, I didn't have kids, it was pre-kids.
Pre-kids.
We had about 80 people over.
80 people over. Yes, it was raging. You saw it in really well. How was, January 1? Did you feel okay? Yeah, no, very foggy. Yes, Y2K was intense. I was actually 11, which some of you now are like, whoa, she is a child. And so I am technically still a millennial. So you're hearing from a millennial. I was 11. I remember just being like, everybody is so crazy. Hopefully the world does not end. Pretty sure it's not going to. The good thing about what happened in Y2K, FYI, it is estimated that between $200 and $600 billion was spent in preparing for Y2K. Amazing. But then I did watch interviews with some of those people who spent a lot of that money, and they were like, but the world didn't end. And I was like, that's how you justify yourself. So hopefully by the year 3000 or 10,000, we'll all know it's probably going to be okay. So here in the year 2000, I thought I'd do a little flashbacks. This is what was happening. Faith Hill was the top song. Faith Hill, Breathe. Anyone remember that? I was 11, I do not. What else was happening? Sopranos was the top TV show. Good. Who was a fan? Yeah. This was the top movie. Castaway. What was his name again? Wilson. Good. That was the top movie. What else was happening? That was the election in America. Al Gore, George W. Bush. And we know September 11 obviously happened the following year. So this turned out to be a really, particularly important election. Helen Clark was the Prime Minister of New Zealand in 1999. It was Jenny Shipley versus Helen Clark. Probably the first time in history we've had 2 women going against each other, which is amazing. The iPod wasn't even out. So it was coming out soon, which is really weird. Big Brother came out. Who was a fan? No. I'm like, I was 11, I was a big fan. Okay. This is important for me. The final Harry Potter book was released, so that was quite a long time ago now. And everyone was playing Snake. Who had a Nokia? Yeah. And we all thought we were awesome because we were playing Snake, and that was like advanced technology. And I don't even know if Snake exists anymore. Does it? Do people do that? You're playing it. That's weird. It's really... It's on what? It's on Google. You play it on Google. Ah, okay. Guys, you could go back, get a flashback, nostalgia. All right, so I want to say up front that I don't usually use notes. This is not very like me, but it is the school holidays, which means that I have 3 boys touching themselves at home every single day. So my capacity to memorize anything is basically 0. So I'll be coming back to the, whatever this is called, quite a bit, because I just, my mind is in a fog a lot of the time. So I wanted to read, it's from Isaiah 61, the year of the Lord's favor. Does anybody know that? Yeah? So I'm going to read it, and then, which goes for a little bit, and then I'll let you know what we're going to do this morning. All right. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Aliens will shepherd your flocks. Foreigners will work your fields and vineyards, and you will be called priests of the Lord. You will be named ministers of our God. You will feed on the wealth of nations, and in their riches you will boast. Instead of their shame, my people will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, they will rejoice in their inheritance. Don't worry, it finishes soon. And so they will inherit a double portion in their land, and everlasting joy will be theirs. For I, the Lord, love justice. Great line. I hate robbery and iniquity. In my faithfulness, I will reward them and make an everlasting covenant with them. Their descendants will be known among the nations and their offspring among the peoples. All who see them will acknowledge that they are a people the Lord has blessed. So what I really like about this, and I haven't spent a lot of time in Isaiah, but what I really like about this, the year of the Lord's favor, is it it sits in this tension. It talks about the good and the bad. So it talks about suffering and celebration. It speaks to hard things that are going on, poverty, injustices, sorrow, mourning, grief. But it also talks about praise and abundance, and the healing of places and people. So it really sits in this tension between 2 different things. And that's what I want us to do today. I want us to look at some of the really hard things that are happening in our communities and society, and then I want us to look at some of the really great things. So I want us to look at some suffering and to look at some celebration, because it would be wrong to leave one without the other. We always need that hope that you were talking about. So we're going to go there on both things. I'm going to speak to 3 issues that are particularly poignant, I think, at the moment, and I'm going to speak to the ones that affect me personally. So I wanted to share stuff that was personal, because then we get a sense of what that issue looks like in the day-to-day life of someone. Some of the stuff is really hard for me to say. It's not easy. It can seem like people up the front feel really confident all the time, and that is not the case. This is definitely a vulnerable place for me, and sharing some of this is very difficult. So that's what I'm going to do, though, in the hope that we will get a sense of those particular issues. So, when I was 14, I started what I call my mental health adventure or journey. So when I was 14, I was in a pretty good family. There were things happening for sure, but I knew that my parents loved me and cared about me. I wasn't bullied at school. I had friends. I had boyfriends. I was fine at sports. I was fine at education. Everything was pretty much okay. There wasn't anything particular for me to be really upset about. But I had... it's really hard to dictate because it didn't really have any words. I had this, in some ways, this shadow self that would come over me mostly at night. And so I would go to school and that would be fine, and then I would go home and that would be fine. You're a teenager and you're a bit angsty and mean to your parents, but it would be fine. But then when I went to my room at night, I would start crying. And I would just basically cry every night for weeks on end. So I wouldn't sleep, because I was up in this kind of devastated, sorrow-filled, horrific, dark place, and then just finally get to sleep in the wee hours. So I would do that night on, night on, night on for weeks, and then I'd maybe get a few weeks of respite, and then it would happen again. This shadow self would come back. And I remember thinking, oh, this is just what happens for everyone. Like, this is just part of growing up. It seems, surely this is quite normal. And I thought, that's crap. And I don't really want to live that life. Like, why is everybody doing this? And that's really bad. And why would anybody want to kind of be an adult if this is what it meant? And so that went on for a while, and by the time I was 16, it kept happening. So I would have this kind of shadow self, and it would come over me for a few weeks at a time, and then I would come out, and then I would go back in. And I started kind of briefly, in little, few word sentences telling people around me, like, oh, I get really upset, and there's nothing wrong, but I'm still really upset. And then I started to get a sense from other people that actually that wasn't happening to everyone. It was probably happening for some, but not to everyone. And then I thought, well, that's even worse, because that means it's actually just me. And obviously it wasn't, but in my experience it was. And then I thought, well, I really don't want to live that life. And it got really, really bad. And I never self-harmed, and I never attempted suicide, but sometimes I would take a knife into my bed with me at night, just in case it got so bad that I just needed an escape. I didn't actually want to die, but what I really did want was for this thing, whatever it was, to just go away. I just wanted to be out, like just to be done. But really what I wanted was just a life that was free of that. So that was when I was 16. And then by the time I was 19, so this is 5 years now, it was still happening, and the experience was just getting worse and worse and worse. And by the time I was at university, still not really telling people, because then you just look weird, because nothing's really wrong with your life. You don't really have anything bad going on. But it would get so bad that I would know I was unsafe to be by myself, and so I would go to my flatmate, so my best friend and I, we lived together for 2 years, and I would sneak into her room at night and I would just sleep in her bed because I felt so unsafe and in my room alone. And she never asked why. Isn't that amazing? And a little bit weird. But she never asked why, and years later when I said, why didn't you ask me why I kept sneaking into your room? And she said, I just knew that you needed me and that you would tell me when you were ready. Which is just amazing. And she said, I didn't mind. You could sleep in there anytime you wanted. So by the time I was 19, I thought, you know what, actually, I'm not going to make it to 20. This has been 5 years of my life. I don't know anything different, and I'm out. So I decided that I needed to change something. So I went to a counselor at my church, which was free, which is just phenomenal. If you offer free counselling, and just deep respect. So I went to this counsellor, and instantly she just referred me to a GP. And what that doctor then did was a quick assessment and then prescribing medication for bipolar. Every time, it's very hard to talk about. So 2 things happened in that moment. The first was relief. Because what people didn't know was that every Sunday when I turned up to church, I just desperately pleaded with God to save me. And he did, in the form of a doctor and medication. He turned up. So I just felt this enormous relief that actually there was a name, that there was a process, that there was a solution. And that there was a reason that this had all happened. I wasn't just crazy, a little bit crazy. It's hard to say what your definitions are. But, that this would be gone. This would go. So deep relief. But at the same time, fear. Because what they said to me was that you'll probably be on this medication for the rest of your life. And that is true. So it's been, over a decade, and that has proven to be the case. And there is some stress in that because you know that it is impacting your spouse. You know that inevitably it will impact your kids. I had so much anxiety about telling colleagues just in case they would think I couldn't make sound decisions. Worry about telling friends that they would look at you differently. So much shame and stigma still around mental health, particularly bipolar, because people say it to me all the time. They don't know that this is what's happening for me, and they'll say, I think that person's a bit bipolar. And it's like, that is just such a bad thing to say. And that happens to me all the time. And so there's still this kind of undercurrent of shame. And I'm not alone. We know that people in our societies feel this all the time, and I've got some of those stats. So 1 in 5 in this country will experience a serious mood disorder. 1 in 7 young people will have a major depressive episode by the time they're 24. New Zealand adolescent suicide rates, I'm sure you've heard this in the media, are the highest globally. And of our vulnerable groups, so Sam has spoken to some of these issues this morning, 1 in 5 of our trans young people have attempted suicide in the last 12 months. Have tried. Not just thought about it, have tried. 40% of our trans young people have self-harmed in the last 12 months. Now, I don't know about you and what position you take, but I think that's not okay. Yeah, I think it's not okay for anyone to be killing themselves off from our community at such great rates. They are so desperate to not be part of this world that they are choosing to take themselves out. That is not okay. All right, next issue. Are you ready? I am a female. Don't know if you realize just yet. But I was a girl, am a woman, and I'm going to talk about some experiences of what it's like to be a woman. And I want to say before I go any further that I don't believe in, man bashing or having some kind of big go at men. I'm married to a spectacular man. I have 3 sons, so I deeply care about the way we talk about boys and men. And in fact, the feminist who had the biggest impact on my life was a man, my dad. So I have a lot of love for men. But there are some unique experiences about being a woman that it is important for the other 50% to know about. Because women are 50% of our population, we really need to understand their experiences, and some of them are not that great. So I'm going to share an article I came across. It's about what it means to be a woman. In the first couple of years, I've added little bits just to create a New Zealand context for it. In the first couple of years of her life, it will appear that being a girl is easy. She's young, she is innocent, she believes that the world is this beautiful, amazing thing. She can do whatever she sets her mind to because there are endless possibilities. As soon as she reaches school, a young girl becomes conscious of her body. By now she has realized that if she's too big, they will torture her by calling her a whale. But if she's too small, they'll call her anorexic. Each little feature will be picked out and dissected like a frog in a biology class. Her stomach should be flat, eyebrows perfectly even. She will always smell of vanilla or some sort of flower. Her skin can never be oily or get pimples, even though every teenager does. Anything unique on her body that doesn't fit into the standard of beauty society has set will classify her as unappealing until she finds a way to fix it. Girls sit in their rooms looking in the mirror, putting makeup on at the age of 8 because they believe it makes them look more beautiful. Sometimes during games at school, a boy says to another boy, "You're playing like a girl," or "Stop being such a girl," implying the female gender in and of itself is undesirable and insulting. From the moment a girl matures, her body becomes sexualized. Her breasts get larger so that people stare at her chest while she stands in front of the class and attempts to give an admirable presentation that they won't remember because they were too invested in what was happening under her shirt. A woman learns to be conscious of what she is wearing. If she wears something covering up too much, she will be referred to as a prude or a goody-goody. On the opposite side, wearing something too short means that she is kinky and likes to mess around. Someone touches her without her permission when she wears her miniskirt, and although she protests, the offender claims she must have wanted it because of her attire. She hears from peers and adults all around her that girls who say they have been assaulted are potentially making it up to get attention. She learns she can't go running at night, that she should not go out alone, and needs to lock her doors when she's in the car. Being a woman means that she is never really safe. As she grows up, she looks at women around her in workplaces and homes and sport, on TV, movies, music, maybe in porn. She notices that most of the leadership is done by men, that women do almost all the household duties, even when those women have full-time jobs. She notices that sports that include men are the most popular and well-paid, that you never see a male receptionist, and when people refer to a doctor or a pilot, even without realizing, they assume it's a man. Recently in New Zealand, the denominational national church leaders wrote a response to the Christchurch shootings. It was a good letter, but not a single leader was female. There were 50. As a Christian, she may have been told that she will submit to her husband, that he is the leader of her family because of his sex rather than his abilities. At the same time, in porn, we see women submitting all the time, smacked, hit, told to shut up, called names, and in physical pain because of the acts they are expected to perform. People like Kim Kardashian and Cardi B teach her from an early age that being naked is female empowerment and body confidence. When a woman finds a significant other, she starts to think of having a family. Although it seems like an easy decision to make, there are many factors to consider. The first is the fact that she will probably have to sacrifice her career. Once she gets pregnant, she will have months of sickness, back pain, and multiple doctor's appointments that her job may or may not have tolerance for. Then she decides whether to return to work and wonder if people are judging her for leaving her children, or stay home and wonder if people are judging her for not achieving enough. She was told in school that she could have it all, but soon realizes that that's not true. On a different side, if her and her partner decide not to have children, society looks at them as weird. If she can't have children, she is deemed a failure. Or if she never marries, then what was wrong with her? Through the years of a woman's life, it has been engraved in her that she must be married with kids in order to be fully woman. Speaks to what Sam talked about this morning. We know that in children's movies, this is recent stats, male leads outnumber female leads 2-1. Male characters have 60% of the screen time, and female characters get half the amount of speaking lines that a male character would get. 1 in 3 girls in New Zealand will experience some kind of sexual abuse. 90% of the time, it will be by someone they know. In a recent running survey, 84% of females said they had been harassed while running, and 16% feared for their lives. We have a Me Too movement with story after story of women saying they were treated terribly at work. What does it actually even mean when we don't have a Me Too movement until 2017? Now, no matter what you believe about feminism or women's rights movements, the fact is, and it's actually undisputed, that if you're a woman, you work harder, you're paid less, and you are unsafe in this country and in your communities. It enrages me that when I go to a room of teenagers and I ask the girls, hey, what do you do when you're walking home from school to keep yourself safe? Every single one of them has a strategy. They hold their keys in their hand so that if someone comes up beside them, they'll be able to push them away. They look at their phone or they hold it to their ear even though they're not talking to someone because they want people in their cars to know that they are on the phone to someone. They don't walk certain alleyways. They don't run after 4 o'clock. They make sure that if they do run, they wear baggy clothes. They have strategies. If you ask teenage boys the same thing, they look at you often very blankly. It's 2020 and our girls are still doing that. So, next issue. A big part of my work is around pornography, like you've heard about. So my job is technically, I'm the research and training lead for a charity which is called the Light Project. And one of my core roles is to understand porn. So to know what's available, to know what's in the content, to know what's trending and what's fashionable, for example, what people are watching, the impacts that it's having on them. So reading through the international literature and then developing resources or strategies for young people and the adults in their lives to talk to them about that. So what we know about porn is that it's available everywhere. So you can find porn on Instagram, you can find porn on blog pages, you can find porn on streaming sites. We're in a focus group with a group of young people. Almost every one of them saw porn on a streaming site. Do you guys know what that is? No? So a streaming site is where a young person probably would go to watch a TV show or a movie that hadn't been released yet. And they're often not regulated, so there's a lot of porn available on them just in ad strips down the side. We know that the content is often horrific. So in a recent study just done in 2019, 35% of the porn scenes assessed had non-consensual behaviours. 35%. And 46% had incestual themes. Mum and son, daddy, daughter, stepbrother, stepsister, stepdad, stepdaughter, you name it, 46%, almost half, of all the scenes available were incestual. We know that our young people are seeing this at crazy rates and very early. So 3/4 of our young people will see porn by the time they're 17, but 1/4 of them will see it at 12 or younger. And if you're talking just about boys, which is obviously what I have, 1 in 3 will see it at 12 or younger. 70% of the time it's accidental, so they weren't looking for it, they weren't going out searching for porn. Sometimes they were, but most often they were doing homework, they were looking at a TV show, they were on Instagram and something came up and they just, whatever, it came up to them or they followed down the pathway. We know that it impacts their ideas about gender, that they are more likely to have risky sex, that they're more likely to be aggressive in sex, that it impacts their mental health, and that they have bad sexual health outcomes. They are less likely to enjoy sex when they're older. They are more likely to feel isolated. They feel shame. They, have some people, not lots of people, but some people develop an addictive pattern. They are more likely not to use, condoms when they have sex. Girls talk about sex being done to them, not with them. They are more likely to include non-consensual behaviours because on porn, that's what's sexy. So how are they to know that they shouldn't replicate that in real life? And the reality is that as adults, we're often just too uncomfortable to talk about it with them. So we leave them high and dry. It's too scary for us to talk about it with them. We feel worried that if we talk about porn, they're going to go and watch it. Or we don't want to know the answer, or we think, oh, that's not my kid. Sorry. Probably is. I mean, we think we're so far away from it, so we don't bring it up. And essentially, what we're doing to our kids is we're letting them be violated by online content, and we're not intervening. Or we're not giving them a strategy for how to cope with that material. We're just saying, good luck. Here's the internet, fun. Hope you have a good sex life, bye. And it's messing them up. So I'm going to pause there, and I just want you to talk to the person next to you. So we've had a look at 3 different issues, and I just want you to talk to the person next to you. What was the one that kind of resonated with you the most, and what are your reflections on it? Go. Just want to grab that water. How are we doing? I don't actually know what my time is. Oh, the ancestral content. You didn't know that was so high. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I knew from the last probably year, because I'm on porn sites regularly enough to get a sense of what's happening. So I felt like it was really moving in this trajectory, and then it came out through the research, and we're doing some of our own over the summer. So yeah, I was not super surprised. And one of the theories just about that is that one of the reasons it's moving in that direction is because as TV shows and movies they push more into the taboos. So if you've got Game of Thrones already pushing into incestual sex, then porn always has to go a step further. So that's one of the themes around that, is actually that they're responding to mainstream media and needing to push the taboo. So that's a dyadic relationship. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, same. I was also taught that. Yeah. You're saying people didn't? You didn't wait? Or, I was like, is this a disclosure? Which would be fun. Let's do it. Who waited? No, yeah, I was taught that too, totally. And that was, yeah, I think that still is the majority message in most churches. Yeah. Yeah, like Joe, how does Joe protect Joe? Yeah. That's been a journey. I started down this pathway probably nearly 3 years ago. And initially, myself and my colleagues said that we would never look at porn. So we were like, we're not going to do that. That's not something we feel we need to do or should do. And then someone in government, who was very responsive to this issue, said to us, you need to put your big girl pants on. And then she goes, if our kids are watching it, probably we should know what they're seeing. And I was like, yeah, true. So I decided that my discomfort was less important than their well-being, and put them first. And every time we have a lot of measures around us to keep us safe. Really good supervision. We have good process. It's very methodical. But I think that's at the forefront. It's like my discomfort is not as important as a generation's well-being. And I don't want parents to have to do that, so I'll do that. All right, I'm going to one more and then we'll keep going. Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist, surprisingly for my job. I feel a lot of hope. I mean, every day I have conversations with people, with couples, or with young people where I see progress, where there's these little moments of change, where there's these little clicks and that happen for employers, managers, pastors, and I think it's slow. Too slow, but we're getting there. And I guess that's a good bridge. So what I'm going to do now, sorry, can we talk? You'll come tell me after.
Not about porn,
Yeah.
but your comment about suicide rate amongst our youth in New Zealand. The percentage in New Zealand says that there is more suicide amongst our youth on the coast here.
Yeah.
And we put a program together, government funded,
Great.
to address that.
Cool. Good.
It was called Youth Quest.
Yeah.
And they would have about 15 go through the program for 6 weeks.
Great.
Government stopped the funding.
Yep.
Youth Quest does not exist anymore.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, yeah. There's government funding. It's very interesting. It's a real adventure, that one. Yeah. It's complicated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a slideshow of some really great things happening. Who's up for some celebration? Yeah? So here we go.
There's a lullaby saving us right. Giving back the time, stilling my desire. She knows it's mad, the snow's come back. The rose unburned, the page unturned.
Okay, Netherlands has achieved the goal of officially becoming the first country without stray dogs.
Dust your conscience off, you better stop.
In Rome, you can now pay for metro train tickets with plastic bottles. So far, 350,000 have been recycled.
I'll find out.
South Korea is organising daytime disco parties for people over 65 to tackle loneliness and dementia. California limits pet store sales of cats, dogs and rabbits to rescue or shelter animals only. Iceland becomes first country in the world to legally enforce equal pay for women and men. San Francisco's Cuddle Club unites senior people and senior dogs who need companionship, exercise and affection. A robot called Larvalbot is delivering coral babies to the Great Barrier Reef to help restore coral reefs to what they were. This amazing village in India celebrates their daughters by planting 111 trees every time a girl is born. After it was revealed that more than 1,500 people die annually by suicide, Sweden premieres world's first mental health ambulance. South Korea once recycled 2% of its food waste, now it recycles 95%, thanks to smart bins and special biodegradable bags. Colombian women with visual impairments trained to detect breast cancers are outperforming doctors. These humpback whales have come back from the brink of extinction thanks to conservation efforts. They've gone, we've missed it, but they're high. YouTube has banned white supremacist content and thousands of hate speech channels will be removed. A 7-mile bee corridor of vibrant wildflowers is being planted to encourage the insects population in London. For the first time, mathematics' most prestigious prize has been awarded to a woman. In a breakthrough that could save thousands of lives, scientists convert all blood types to the universal type O that is safe for all patients to receive. Now, in New Zealand, we can pause the music. In response to the Christchurch shootings, our entire country gathered together and said no to racism. We put it on our Facebook profiles, we hugged members of the Muslim community, and we told them that they were welcome here. We are now recording mass data on mental health, which shows bad outcomes, but now that we finally record the data, we can make good plans. We have record numbers of Māori and Pacifica young adults graduating as doctors, showing a more nationally representative workforce. Teen pregnancy is declining. Termination rates are declining. The number of divorces has decreased since 2013. And in my area, in Porn, young people all the time tell us that they want information, they want to make good decisions, and they want to have better relationships. Our young people in New Zealand, 70% of them said they want more restrictions to accessing porn. We have pretty good kids, and there's a lot to celebrate there. So where does this leave us? So we've looked at some suffering issues, some big complex kind of problems, and we've looked at some celebrations and kind of done some yays. Well, what you've basically heard today is kind of a lot of before and afters. So a before and then an after. So HIV, combated with research. An endangered species coming to fruition again. Deforestation or declined coral reefs, someone cared and they intervened. And those things became flourishing again. And I've shared 3 before stories. So around mental health, with our vulnerable groups killing themselves off from our country, our trans young people being the victims, with our gender, and women consistently feeling less capable, less worthy, and unsafe in our communities, and pornography violating our young people en masse with little intervention from us. So essentially what we can do at this point is choose whether we want to be part of the before or the after of those stories. If you want to be in the before, then when someone makes a joke about a gay person, oh, that's so gay, then do nothing. If you want to be in the after, you say, my God loves justice and hates iniquities, and that's not okay, stop. If you want to be in the before with our trans young people, then you say that it's a bit weird. Or you say, that doesn't make sense. Or people who want to change their gender are just dumb or ridiculous, or what are they thinking? If you want to be in the after, then go and have an actual conversation with someone from the LGBT community. Stop talking about them and start talking with them. You wouldn't have a group of men in a room talking about women. We wouldn't think that was okay. So why do a group of heterosexuals talk about homosexuals without a homosexual person in the room? It's weird. And it's not okay. So if your church really wants to go there on the gay issue, on the trans issue, then stop talking about them, ring up Rainbow Youth, ask what their experiences are. I've got a number of people you could talk to who have been in the church and left. Talk to them. Ask them how they felt. That's what it looks like to be in the after part of that story. If you want to be in the before of women's movements and equal rights, then when someone makes a casual joke about women being in the kitchen as though they were ever funny, then you say, no, my God loves justice and hates iniquities, that's not okay, stop. When you see all the women make all the food and then get up and do all the dishes while men sit there and have a lovely time, you say, no, this is not okay. We are equal. I'm getting up to do the bloody dishes. Stop. If you look around your church and you look at who the leaders are and you look at who does the preaching, and if you're not 50%, you're not representative of your congregation. If you're not 50% on sermons, then the women are not speaking enough. If your teenagers aren't being told that they can get up and preach, then they're not represented well enough in the church. You actually have to create change in order to see it happen. It's not just going to be like, whoa, one day, awesome, they were equal. No, it doesn't happen. You actually have to do real things to be part of the after story. If your only female staff member is the person who runs the children's ministry, then no, that is not enough. It's not okay to just have people at the table. They need to sometimes be at the head of that table. So if you want to be part of the after story, you make some big moves. If you want to be part of the after story on pornography, then you do some training. You call us up and you say, hey, could you come and do a session with us in our pastoral care? Let's talk about porn in marriages. Let's talk about porn in young people. Let's talk about porn and senior leadership. Let's talk about the issues that we're having in this church. Let's do a talk for our young people. Let's do a talk for our parents. Honestly, I have had more conversations with mainstream media than I have with churches this year, 2019. I have had more just TV reporters. I have had more government conversations. I have had more talks with the police, with Oranga Tamariki, with the DHBs. They are more interested in this conversation than the number of people who call me from a church. We can be part of the after story on these issues, but at the moment, we're still just kind of hanging out on the befores. So if we want to see more good news stories, then we've got to create good news stories. I'm going to finish on this quote. Does anyone know Rachel Held Evans? Yeah, and she unfortunately died recently, but she was a great thinker and writer. And this is what she said, and then I'll close. What I love about the Bible is that the story isn't over. There are still dragons and beasts. There are still prophets in our midst. It may not look like it, but the resistance is winning. The light is breaking through. I'd like for us all to contribute to that resistance.